So I'm going to be talking today about the Fluent device and long-term profit gain. And I'm going to start by showing you a few ads.
On your last trip, did you discover what the Earth people eat?
Yes, it is a surprise. No, I haven't cooked it before. Yes, it is foreign. No, Jason, it's not a hamburger. Yes, Alice and Dolly will love it. No, Nick, no garlic. And Michael. Remember Preston?
If I didn't get you out of bed. This coffee tastes good. Hello.
Hi, man. This is Cresta's new flavor, black currant. I wonder what's... Black currant flavor, huh? That's okay.
Cresta, not in 5 fruity flavors.
It's frothy, man.
We're wasting time here, Boff. This man has a serious case of snakebite, and there's only one thing that's going to save him. I'm going to have to locate the wound and suck out the poison. Yes, actually, I think perhaps you'd better phone Barclay. Boff, I'm not sure I've got there. You know, my lips were a little... But, well, I thought I had a solution, but then...
Io Cinzano bianco, signora.
Thank you.
Ah, yes, gracias.
Ah, due?
No, mine was a Cinzano as well. Ah, now that's better. Oh, can't you just smell those Italian wines, suffused with herbs and spices from 4 continents? I'm being boring. Oh, sorry. Sorry. All right. Getting your head down, sweetie. Jolly good idea.
Good girl, Phoebe. Nice and calm today.
Karen, I've got a cat with no pulse here. I need adrenaline and an IV line as quick as you can, please.
Long-term campaigns, and as it turns out, a particularly effective type of long-term campaign. Why am I interested in long-term campaigns? Well, because of a number of things that are happening in the industry today. We've seen from Les and Peter that campaign effectiveness is deteriorating. We've seen that short-termism is on the rise, and the industry is grappling with a proliferation of new media channels and their effectiveness. And so it's never been more important or more urgent to ask ourselves the question, how do we create profitable long-term campaigns? My role at System1 is to take the latest thinking from the behavioral sciences and to translate that into new ways of making profitable marketing. And what we've learned from the behavioral sciences over the last 10, 20 years is that we think much less than we think we think. So we love to believe we're analytical, deliberative creatures, but actually many of the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis are made quickly and instinctively and guided by experience. That's what we call System 1 thinking, fast and frugal thinking. And there are 3 features of System 1 that it's really important for advertisers to understand and to know about. The first of these is that we learn gradually over time through experience to help us make decisions very quickly in the moment. So we learn gradually over time to help us make decisions quickly in the moment. The second of these is that we're hugely guided by emotion. So during the course of our lives, we go through experiences much as like this, and emotions help us to encode whether the experience is good, bad, or indifferent. And that helps us in future experiences, similar occasions, to make decisions between alternatives. So emotions help memory, but they also help us to decide between options, guiding and simplifying our choices. The third feature of System 1 that it's really important for advertisers to know about is that we are pattern recognition machines. System 1 is a pattern recognition machine. It scans the environment all the time for regularities, things that we have seen before. And there are really good evolutionary reasons for this, for knowing the familiar and trusting the familiar. So what this means really for advertisers is that they need to create three things. They need to create fame, so salience amongst the broadest population possible. Heard a lot about reach and creating reach and penetration. Because to our System 1 minds, if a brand comes quickly and easily to mind, it is a good choice. Also, advertisers need to create feeling, because if I feel good about a brand, again, to our System 1 autopilots, it is a good choice. Both fame and feeling are talked about quite a lot by Les and Peter and the IPA, but there is a third F. There is a third F that we need to look at and consider, and that's fluency, processing fluency. Our pattern recognition machine to recognize a brand quickly, because if I recognize a brand quickly, if it's distinctive enough, it's a good choice. And psychology shows us that if we recognize things quickly, if they have very good processing fluency, we're likely to pay more for them. So, I'd like to have a little game with you, if that's all right. A bit of our audience participation, so please indulge me on this. Hope you're all in full voice. I'd like to shout out the brand that I'm going to flash up. Okay, are you ready for this? We're going to do 4 of these. Ready? Yep. Ferrari, brilliant. KFC, yes. Starbucks, very good, very good. Oreo, well done. Gosh, that's a relief. So you all got that. Your System 1 is fully operational this morning, and I bet you did that. You knew those brands, because they're disguised here, of course, by looking at the colors, the shapes, the patterns that you see in front of you here. Make it very easy for you very quickly to know what brands we're talking about. I'm going to try another one of these, hostage to fortune. This time, I'm going to flash up some advertising properties. Now, some of you are hoping for some long memories in the room. Others are more recent. So are you ready for this? We'll do this again. Ready? Go.
That works. So. Wait.
Brilliant. Thank goodness for that. You all got it. So, 4 advertising properties. Advertising properties, what I would call a fluent device. Devices that help us with our processing fluency. Here are 4 other fluent device campaigns, all by all the creative work of John Webster. Perhaps the Shakespeare or the godfather of the fluent device. The Smash Martians, the Hofmeister Bear, the Cresta Bear, and the Honey Monster. And it's interesting watching your faces looking at these, because they're instantly mesmerizing. Front and center, these characters at heart of the creative. And driving the creative as well. So one more of these, sorry, this is the last one. I'd like now to flash up some slogans, and this time, as we show them, you'll hopefully, so you've got the idea by now. What I'd like you to do is to shout out the brand again. Are you ready for this? Let's go. Snickers, yeah. Specsavers. Stella.
Lincoln.
Yes. Thinking ahead there, Peter. So, again, a slogan, but not more than just a slogan. This is a device that actually, it's all about creating the drama. It serves the drama. It creates a scenario, a familiar scenario, that when you've seen it once, twice, actually the same scenario is repeated again and again, and creates a fluency that goes with it. So my hypothesis 6 months or so ago, chatting to various people in this room, was that long-term campaigns with a fluent device would be more likely to generate profit gain. So what we've done is a review of long-term campaigns, only long-term campaigns we're looking at, on the IPA's Databank, going back to 1992. That's about 500 campaigns. And we've coded up those campaigns with a Fluent device, one of those two definitions that I've just shared with you. And we haven't had the visibility of the effectiveness data. We've done this blind. And then Peter has very kindly looked at how profitable these campaigns are, the sort of effects that they have in the business world. And so this independent analysis has helped us to look at whether these things are more profitable or not, and whether we should be using them. And thank you, I should say, both to Peter and the IPA for helping me to do this. So Peter very, very sensibly said at the start of this, well, look, I think you need to have some sensible definitions here. So here are our two definitions. So Fluent device definition number 1, a fictitious character or characters, it could be humans or creatures, created by the brand and used as the primary vehicle for the drama in more than one ad across a campaign. So here you've got some examples from the IPA database. All of those appear on the IPA Databank. The second definition is a creative conceit or an expression in the form of a slogan used more than once in a campaign as the primary vehicle for the drama, without which the ad would make little sense. These campaigns would make little sense if these slogans did not exist. So they are driving the drama. So you're not you when you're hungry, you should have gone to Specsavers, it's reassuringly expensive, and the priceless scenario and treatment. So before we look at the results of our work, it's worth just pondering for a minute on the data bank and what we have at our disposal. So we have, since going back to 1980, about 620 long-term campaigns. What we're going to be looking at today are two different time periods from that. We're not going to go back that far. We're going to go back to 1992. And 1990 was the year that the long and broad effects category was introduced. And in 1992, we see an explosion, a doubling in the number of long-term campaigns that are on that database. So we're going back to 1992. But for our effectiveness measures, we're going to go back to 1998. And this 1998 was a time when there was a slight change in the way that the effects were coded up. So Peter and I have gone back to 98 to look at the effectiveness data. So what did we find? Well, first of all, it's worth just knowing how many of these things there are. And there are about, of all the long-term campaigns, however you look at it, back 98 or 92, about 25% of these long-term campaigns have a Fluent device, and pretty evenly split between either character or slogan. And there's some overlap between these, because of course you can have both of these things. Perhaps the Hofmeister Bear is a good example of that, Follow the Bear. So you can have both of those, but largely speaking, they're roughly exclusive. So are they more effective? Well, the answer is yes. So what we're going to be looking at here is all long-term campaigns. This is the average of all long-term campaigns, 335 campaigns overall. And this is the proportion achieving very large effects on each of market share gain and profit gain. So I'm looking here principally at the long-term effects. So we're going to be comparing with that average our Fluent devices. And the Fluent devices are 23% or more likely to achieve market share gain and also profit gain. So these Fluent devices really do work. And these are meaningful differences when you look at the number of cases. Is it just down to greater spend? Well, one thing we can do is filter this analysis on those with excess share of voice data. So here are the results for just those campaigns where we have excess share of voice data. I'm just going to put across the top there excess share of voice, the average excess share of voice. You can see actually it's slightly lower for Fluent device campaigns than it is for all long-term campaigns. And still slightly better, in fact much better in terms of profit gain when it comes to the Fluent device campaigns. So these things are more effective, and there's an indication, a very strong indication, that they're perhaps more efficient as well. They're also much more likely to be classified as emotional. So remember, we talked about feeling and fluency. One of the great things about these Fluent device campaigns is that they're able to combine feeling, so an emotional response that you see when you see the character or the familiar treatment, and also that fluency. So very easy, very memorable to remember these things. And I bet many of you remembered some of those campaigns that I showed earlier. They stay a long time in the memory. So I'm just going to compare now character and slogan devices to see what differences there are between those two. I've classified here new customer gains a long-term effect. We could debate that. But we're just going to show the differences between them. And you can see that the character campaign, character fluent devices, are more likely to generate new customer gain, much more likely, in fact, more likely to generate market share gain, and interestingly, also more likely to result in a reduction in price sensitivity. So fluency, one of the great things about fluency and things that are tangible and easy to visualize and to see is that things that we can process easily and that are familiar will reduce price sensitivity. There's a great experiment that was conducted by psychologists where they gave people a dollar bill. And they gave another set of people a slightly doctored dollar bill, so it was slightly unfamiliar. And they asked them how many staples or paper clips, various household items, they could buy with that genuine dollar bill and the dollar bill that was slightly doctored. And what they found was that the people who got the genuine dollar bill, that was easy to process and that was familiar, that had fluency, they thought they could buy twice as many paper clips, twice as many staples and so on, as the people who got the slightly unfamiliar one. So fluency helps us because it makes things easier for us, more effortless. It means that we're actually more inclined to go for those options and to pay more for them. Finally, on the long-term ones, profit gain. So profit gain is much higher, as we saw a minute ago, than the average for both character and slogan devices. Slightly lower for the character device. I have a couple of hypotheses for why this might be. It could be costs of production. It could be that you have to pay the actors, the celebrities, that sort of thing. But also, what's interesting, if you look at short-term effects, is that the slogan device performs slightly better. And that's, I think, because if you imagine, you're going out there to buy a new pair of glasses, and you hear or see the phrase "should have gone to Specsavers," there is a kind of activation element in that treatment in a way that there isn't with the character device. And these character devices take a long time to develop and to build, so they're not immediate. It takes time to establish them. But when they get going, my goodness, don't they work? But there's one additional piece of analysis that I've done, which I think is quite interesting. And it's to compare this Fluent device, the character device, with what I call a hired device. So a real or fictitious character, and deployed in more than one ad across a campaign, but not created by the brand. And not necessarily the primary vehicle for the drama either. So it could just be, we're using a celebrity here to talk about the new benefits of a particular, media package or something. And we've got some examples here. So BT using ET. They've got Terry's Chocolate Orange with Dawn French, Jamie Oliver, Sainsbury's, and Gary Lineker with Walker's Crisp. So what's interesting about these is that actually they're not nearly as good in the long term. They don't achieve not nearly as likely to achieve very large effects as the character device, as a pure Fluent character device. But what they are a bit better at is achieving short-term activation effects. These celebrities are known, generally speaking, otherwise people wouldn't be using them, and they have a more immediate effect. So, what's the summary of our effectiveness analysis? That, first of all, that Fluent devices 20% or more likely than average to achieve the important long-term effects of market share gain and profit gain. And actually, if you just look at Fluent device campaigns versus campaigns that have no Fluent device, so not comparing with the average, but just looking at this kind of the other, if you like, it rises to about 32% more likely to achieve long-term effects. And Fluent devices are also more efficient than average, at least there's some indication of that in the data. Fluent devices are particularly powerful because they both speak to the System1 pattern recognition machine, but also they evoke a powerful, on the whole, emotional response. And we see that campaigns are classified, more likely to be classified as emotional when we break them down to Fluent devices. And character Fluent devices generate larger, longer effects, including penetration gain and reductions in price sensitivity. I think that's particularly interesting, the price sensitivity finding, because you wouldn't necessarily think that putting a furry monster on the screen would reduce your price sensitivity, but it can do. Slogan Fluent devices work almost as hard in the long term, and they're marginally better in the short term. So it might be that you want to think about how you use those two different types of device depending on your brief. And hired devices, characters appropriated by brands are less effective on average than a pure Fluent device. And I have to just clarify again here that these aren't necessarily defined as those characters driving the drama. So it's worth pointing that out. So that's the first part of the presentation. The second part of the presentation is looking at the Fluent device over time, because there has been a change in how these devices are used. I'm going to plot back to 1992 for you, the incidence of Fluent device campaigns in each of the submission years. And you'll see that they're disappearing. So in 1992, 41% of submissions included one of these, 12% in 2016. And there is a downward trend, the demise of the Fluent device. They're an endangered species. What I'm going to do is just overlay on the top of this chart some still visuals of a number of these of the character devices, just so you get a feeling of what sort of campaigns we're talking about. So back in '92, we had the Andrex Puppy, we had Papa Nicole, Renault Clio, we had the Oxo family, we had Caramel Bunny in '94, we've got Cocoa Pops Monkey, we've got Philadelphia, we've got the Gold Blend Couple, we have the Ribena Berries. I don't know if anyone remembers any of these. Hopefully some long memories in the audience. We have Famous Grouse. Again, we have Papa Nicole. And again, we have the Oxo family. It's funny how you see a lot of repetition because presumably they continue to be effective. And they're being submitted again and again. Felix the cat, the Lurpak Buttermen. We've got Prunella Scales as in Tesco adverts. The Budweiser Frog, Howard, Halifax, 118. Gradually, they're starting to tail off. It's getting more and more difficult to find these sorts of campaigns in the database. Felix again, Howard again, keep cropping up. Jane and Adam, the BT couple, the Bounty Housewives, and then Brad and Dan, the Fosters lads. But they've almost disappeared. There aren't many left. And what's another interesting observation is that they're largely FMCG, not entirely FMCG, as I'll show you in a second, but many of these devices were used by FMCG. But as you can see with Howard and 118 and various others, they're not exclusively used by FMCG. So one of the interesting things I thought we should do is perhaps lay on top of this demise the interesting question, percentage of UK consumers who agree with the statement, I enjoy TV ads as much as the programs. And thank you to Paul for suggesting I do this, because something very interesting emerges. That the demise of the long term of this Fluent device is, I'm a pattern recognition machine, we all are. I think we can all see what's happening. But there is a reduction in, a concomitant and concurrent reduction in this measure. And I think this has really important implications for the industry. If these two things really are linked, and obviously I don't know that they are, it's perhaps just a coincidence. But if these two things really are linked, then it has huge implications for recruitment to the industry, because this implies that there is a falling liking for the industry, falling trust for the industry. And if we could create these Fluent devices that people really love and enjoy, then perhaps we could address some of those issues, the wider issues that the industry faces. So why the demise of the Fluent device? Well, I have a number of hypotheses, and they are just hypotheses, and I think there are many more as well that I'm not raising here. And I'd like to discuss them, actually, if we've got time afterwards. I'd love your thoughts on it. The first hypothesis is that perhaps it's because the historical heartland for Fluent devices was FMCG, and perhaps we're not seeing as many FMCG ads now as we did 20 years ago. According to Ubiquity, about 5 to 8% of all ads last year were FMCG, so fairly low levels of FMCG advertising. I don't have any data to support this, but other than the fact that 2/3 of the Fluent devices that we looked at back to 1998 were FMCG, and you saw in the chart there some of those. The second is that short-term thinking and activation thinking, as we've been talking about this morning, is creeping into long-term campaigns and the way that people create long-term campaigns and think about long-term campaigns. The third is perhaps a focus on medium rather than message. I hate the word message. It's not really, I don't think, how the best advertising works, but medium rather than message. We talked a bit about the increase of content marketing over the years, Marsha. And if you trace on the Databank the proportion of all long-term campaigns using any online channel, you can see an increase. Now, I don't think it is purely down to this by any means, but it would be a terrible shame if the two things were connected, because what the Fluent device enables you to do is to work very quickly and very easily, say, in any given Facebook feed, 2 seconds of the honey monster, and those neural networks are refreshed, emotions evoked, and you've done your job. So Fluent devices can be really helpful in the digital era. The fourth, just a thought, is it the way that creative teams are structured? In his memo to all staff in 1994, David Abbott warned of the consequences of having more than one creative team working on any one brief at any one time. If you've got multiple teams working on a brief, perhaps even these days multiple agencies working on the same brief, then it's very difficult to maintain consistency over time and ensure that these sorts of Fluent devices are maintained. Also, increasingly short tenures of CMOs and other interested parties. The fifth one really is just, is it creative fashion? Is it the zeitgeist that there is an instinctive move away from populist artifice? These are pure artifice at their heart. You know, they're created from nothing, towards the authentic and towards experiences, towards always-on content. I was reflecting on this and reflecting on the story today, and I remember hearing about John Webster, who I mentioned earlier, perhaps the godfather of the Fluent device. And he was working with his creative partner, Chris Wilkins, at the time, on the Cadbury Smash advertising. And it occurred to them that if Martians came down to Earth and realized that we peeled potatoes, boiled them for 20 minutes, and then mashed them up, that they'd think we were crazy. Why wouldn't we just use Smash powder instead from a packet? And so it got me thinking, what would the Martian think of the story that I have told today? And I think this video, a short homage to John Webster, perhaps gives you the answer.
On your last trip, did you discover how the Earth people advertise? They use a great many of these. They place them on their tiny screens, run them for a few of their months, then never use them again.
They are clearly a most primitive people.
And for long-term, effective advertising, get a Fluent device. Let's bring them back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Orlando. And I know that we've talked about this, particularly in the context of how do you make multi-platform work together.
Yes, absolutely.
And the role of the Fluent device as a trigger.
Yes, well, I think one of the things we've done actually with one of our clients is to look at how this might work in banner advertising. So showing banners for 2, 4, 6 seconds with and without a Fluent device, you get much greater emotional response and brand recognition at the shorter time limits, as well as the longer time limits, when you have a Fluent device present. So Fluent devices can work, across all channels. And as I said when I was presenting, if you've got a Facebook feed and you've got a limited amount of real estate and time to talk to your customers, you've only got 2 seconds, then if you've got a Fluent device in that window as people scroll through, then it re-evokes those emotions, and the pattern recognition machine switches on. So absolutely relevant today, just as they ever were.
And I think you wanted to invite people to.
I did. Well, I just thought.
Conversation.
I mean, what I wondered what everyone thought. I mean, those are some of my hypotheses. Perhaps another one might be the rise of System 2 pre-testing that has destroyed them. But you know, I don't know. What do you have any thoughts, any reactions, really? Any questions?
I wondered if it was actually just because the IPA not picking up all the tablets.
Yes. Yes, GeoCompario, Meerkats, of course. Yes, and they're so effective that they don't want to submit to the IPA awards, perhaps, to reveal how effective they are. But they aren't on the database. So it's possible, but I don't think so. I mean, I just get a sense that this is a sort of reflection of what's happening in the wider world, certainly in the UK. And that this demise is something real. I mean, apart from those two, it's very difficult to think of many examples of them at all. Now, it's a good example, almost a Fluent device yesterday with the Very case study, which I thought was great. You know, this box that can be used, and it kind of is the vehicle for the drama in the work that was presented, and that helped. You know, that very helpful, clearly very helpful in their growth.
Yeah, and as far as I know, I mean, neither the Meerkats nor, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, nor GeoCompario, nor any of those people, they're not winning creative awards. They're not winning at Cannes, and they're not really valued that much in the creative community. And I think if there is a decline in this type of advertising, and I agree with you that I think there is, even though the IPA awards don't necessarily entirely reflect it, I think it's simply because it's creatively out of fashion, and that creative people no longer want to do stuff that is popular. I mean, it's lovely that you've shown so much of John's stuff. I mean, John did what he did because he liked the idea that people in the pub and the playground would enjoy what he was doing, so that worked. And I kind of got the feeling that maybe I ought to get out of advertising agency world when a creative director at the agency I was at said one day, well, you know, that John Webster stuff, it was all very well in its time, but it's all a bit too populist today. And, you know, I think that the creative establishment has now got into producing stuff that is in some strange bubble that largely doesn't actually, and it's certainly rewarding stuff that doesn't relate to what is actually popular. I mean, in the end of my book, as you know, I said maybe advertising, it's a bit of art, it's a bit of science, but maybe more than both those things, it's actually show business. I more and more think that's true. I think that enjoyment is the common factor that is essential, or very important anyway, to both to fame and fluency and feeling. And that it's when you just look at advertising that works, you know, almost universally, it's borrowing the language and the tropes of entertainment with which it has grown up throughout 100 years. The Fluent device doesn't start in '92. You know, it goes back way beyond that. It goes back to the 1920s. It maybe goes back even to the last century. And there's lots more that one could say about that. So I think you're onto something really important. And it's just a shame that it needs to be sort of spelled out in such a sort of, you know, such a leaden way, if you like, because people just need to look. And I knew you'd take that in the spirit in which I meant it. But, you know, it is like kind of it's explaining the punchline of a joke, but, you know, we seem to be at the stage where we have to do that. Thank you anyway. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I think we must stop for coffee. I'm sure you're gasping. Please add your questions and thoughts in the coffee break to Orlando.
Thank you very much.